You've all heard the story about Paul Revere's midnight ride into Boston to warn of the Redcoat invasion. But there's another man, a founding father and signer of the Declaration of Independence, that made an even more important midnight horseback ride to break Delaware's tie vote at the Constitutional Convention. This vote made the decision of the American colonies to separate from the British Crown a unanimous one. This is the story of a man who didn't let his orphan status, his personal struggles, or his disfiguring health get in his way. Born on October 7, 1728, in Kent County, Delaware, east of Dover, Ceasar Rodney grew up on his family's farm of Byfield and was the eldest child of Ceasar and Elizabeth Crawford Rodney. His family had a long history of involvement in colonial politics, and his paternal grandfather, William Rodney, immigrated to America along with William Penn. He was later the Speaker of the Colonial Assembly of the Delaware Counties in 1704. He had very little formal education and was probably taught by his parents and may have attended a local parson's school. When he was 17, his father died, and he was placed under the guardianship of Nicholas Ridgely, who at that time was the clerk of the peace in Kent County. Here is where it seems Ceasar was introduced to politics. At the age of 22, he was commissioned as the High Sheriff of Kent County, which was quite the accomplishment for a man of his age. In years following, his list of held offices grew to encompass Clerk of the Orphans' Court, Justice of the Peace, Registrar of Wills, and Recorder of Deeds. And when he was 30, he entered service, an elected official for the first time as a representative in the colonial legislature, and was re-elected to that position until it was dissolved in 1776. He then was elected as a representative to the upper house of the state of Delaware until 1784. Ceasar Rodney lived his life as a bachelor, although rumor has it that he did profess interest in a few Delaware ladies about the town. His brother described him as a pleasant fellow with humor and wit and pleasing to be around. He became an accomplished soldier, and during the French and Indian War, he was captain of the Dover Hundred Company and Colonel John Vining's regiment of the Delaware Militia. In 1765, Ceasar, along with Thomas McKeon, was a delegate to the Stamp Act Congress. This was an act of Parliament in Great Britain that imposed a direct tax on the colonies and required printed materials in the colonies to be produced on paper, produced in London, and to carry a revenue stamp. This was extremely unpopular in the American colonies, and in 1774, along with Thomas McKeon and George Read, he served in the Continental Congress, and this is where his infamous and most important act occurred. On July 1, 1776, while at home tending to Loyalist activities in Dover, Ceasar received word from Thomas McKeon that he and George Read were deadlocked on the vote for independence to break from the Crown. In order to cast his vote and break that tie, he got on his horse and rode 80 miles through a thunderstorm that night. Thomas McKeon, many years later, remembered meeting him at the door in his boots and spurs. And while there was enough support for the declaration to move forward, they wanted the support from the colonies to be unanimous, and Ceasar Rodney's vote made that possible. Later, he would sign the Declaration of Independence with Thomas McKeon and George Read. During the Revolutionary War, he tried to join the Continental Army when John Hazlitt was killed, but George Washington sent him back to Delaware because he was so effective in recruiting men from Delaware to fight and in supporting the troops, often from his own pockets. John Adams described him as, quote, "the oddest-looking man in the world, yet there is a sense and fire, spirit, wit, and humor in his countenance." While he received praise from everyone who knew him, Ceasar Rodney certainly struggled. He suffered from asthma his whole life, and in later years he developed a disfiguring cancerous facial tumor and wore a green scarf over his face to hide it. It would take his life in 8 years. After the Revolutionary War, he was elected to the United States Congress under the Articles of Confederation, but could not attend the sessions due to his failing health. He passed away June 26, 1784, at the age of 55. He was buried in an unmarked grave on his family's farm, known as Byfield. In 1934, the state of Delaware gave a statue of Ceasar Rodney to the National Statuary Hall collection that is in the crypt of the United States Capitol, and his midnight ride was memorialized on the Delaware State Quarter issued in 1999. There are honor societies, high schools, and city squares that bear his name. And although he never let his likeness be painted during his lifetime, he has been posthumously memorialized in a number of ways. And that is how history happens.